or even listening to something read in public. The first person up is Stephen Lynch. He is reading from Sputnik, Sweetheart.
Yeah.
Oh, platform.
Okay, like you said, I'm going to read from Haruki Murakami's Sputnik, Sweetheart. This is just a brief excerpt, and I'll try to project. Usually I have a microphone, so. In the spring of her 22nd year, Samira fell in love for the first time in her life. An intense love, a veritable tornado sweeping across the plains, flattening everything in its path, tossing things up in the air, ripping them to shreds, crushing them to bits. The tornado's intensity doesn't abate for a second as it blasts across the ocean, laying waste to Angkor Wat, incinerating an Indian jungle, tigers and all, transforming itself into a Persian desert sandstorm, growing an exotic fortress city under a sea of sand. In short, a love of truly monumental proportions. The person she fell in love with happened to be 17 years older than Samira, and was married, and, I should add, was a woman. This is where it all began, and where it all wound up. Almost. At the time, Samira, Violet in Japanese, was struggling to become a writer. No matter how many choices life might bring her way, it was novelist or nothing. Her resolve was a regular rock of Gilbertal. Nothing could come between her and her faith in literature. After she graduated from a public high school in Kanagawa Prefecture, she entered the liberal arts department of a cozy little private college in Tokyo. She found the college totally out of touch, a lukewarm, spirited place, and she loathed it, and found her fellow students, which would include me, I'm afraid, hopelessly dull, second-rate specimens. Unsurprisingly, then, just before her junior year, she just up and quit. Staying there any longer, she concluded, was a waste of time. I think it was the right move, but if I can be allowed a mediocre generalization, don't pointless things have a place, too, in this far from perfect world? Remove everything pointless from an imperfect life, and it'd lose even its imperfection. Samira was a hopeless romantic, set in her ways, a bit innocent, to put a nice spin on it. Start her talking, and she'd go on non-stop. But if she was with someone she didn't get along with, most people in the world, in other words, she barely opened her mouth. She smoked too much, and you could count on her to lose her ticket every time she rode the train. She'd get so engrossed in her thoughts at times that she'd forget to eat, and she was as thin as one of those war orphans in an old Italian movie, like a stick with eyes. I'd love to show you a photo of her, but I don't have any. She detested having her photograph taken. No desire to leave behind for posterity a portrait of the artist as a young woman. If there were a photograph of Samira taken at that time, I know it would be a valuable record of how special certain people are. I'm getting the order of events mixed up. The woman Samira fell in love with was named Mew. At least that's what everyone called her. I don't know her real name, a fact that caused problems later on. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Mew was Korean, by nationality, but until she decided to study Korean when she was in her mid-20s, she didn't speak a word of the language. She was born and raised in Japan and studied at a music academy in France, so she was fluent in both French and English, in addition to Japanese. She always dressed well, in a refined way, with expensive yet modest accessories, and she drove a 12-cylinder navy blue Jaguar. Kerouac. Wasn't he a Sputnik? Samira couldn't figure out what she meant. Knife and fork poisoned midair, she gave it some thought. Sputnik? You mean the first satellite the Soviets sent up in the 50s? Jack Kerouac was an American novelist. I guess they do overlap in terms of generation. Isn't that what they called the writers back then, you asked? She traced a circle on the table with her fingertip, as if rummaging through some special jar full of memories. Sputnik. The name of a literary movement. You know, how they classify writers in various schools of writing. Like Shigenaga was in the White Birch School. Finally it dawned on Samir. Beatnik. Mew lightly dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a napkin. Beatnik, Sputnik. I never can remember those kinds of terms. It's like the Crimean Restoration or the Treaty of Rapallo. ancient history. A gentle silence descended on them, suggestive of the flow of time. The Treaty of Rapallo, Samira asked. Mew smiled, a nostalgic, intimate smile, like a treasured old possession pulled out of the back of a drawer. Her eyes narrowed in an utterly charming way. She reached out with her long, slim fingers, gently mused Samira's already tousled hair. It was such a sudden yet natural gesture that Samira could only return the smile. Ever since that day, Samira's private name for Mew was Sputnik Sweetheart. Samira loved the sound of it. It made her think of Laika, the dog, the man-made satellite streaking soundlessly across the blackness of outer space. The dark, lustrous eyes of the dog gazing out the tiny window. In the infinite loneliness of space, what could the dog possibly be looking at? This Sputnik conversation took place at a wedding reception for Samira's cousin at a posh hotel in Akasaka. Samira wasn't particularly close to her cousin. In fact, they didn't get along at all. She'd just as soon be tortured as attend one of these receptions, but she couldn't back out at this one. She and Mew were seated next to each other at one of the tables. Mew didn't go into all the details, but it seemed she tutored Samira's cousin on piano, or something along those lines, when she was taking the entrance exams for the university music department. It wasn't a long or very close relationship, clearly, but Mew felt obliged to attend. In the instant Mew touched her hair, Samira fell in love. Like she was crossing a field and bang, a bolt of lightning zapped her right in the head. Something akin to an artistic revelation. Which is why, at that point, it didn't matter to Samira that the person she fell in love with happened to be a woman. I don't think Samira ever had what you'd call a lover. In high school she had a few boyfriends, guys she'd go to the movies with, go swimming with. But I couldn't picture any of those relationships ever getting very deep. Samira was too focused on becoming a novelist to really fall for anybody. If she did experience sex, or something close to it, in high school, I'm sure it would have been less out of sexual desire or love than literary curiosity. I forgot that there was a back part, so I guess I'm done for now.
Oh, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
All right, next is Manuel Yang. He's reading a text on money.
I'll be reading from Karl Marx because today is a free fest, and I was talking to Lance Crandall, who was from Toledo. I hope he was here, but he had to go and dress up as a girl to go to this Halloween costume party. But we were talking about how people who claim to be Marxist or socialist, they never read Marx, you know, and their arguments don't make any sense because it contradicts everything that Marx says. Just like Christians who claim they read the Bible, but they talk about everything that is not in the Bible and become the self-righteous prigs. I mean, if you remember the Sermon on the Mount, you know, Jesus said that you should be looking within yourself and not be a judge of other people. And yet every sect, whether it's Marxist or Christian, has a tendency to commit blasphemy against the original text and the original speakers. So I want to let the man speak for himself. In 1844, Marx was exiled from Prussia because he was arguing for, as an editor of the Neue Rheinische Zeitung, his newspaper in Germany at the time, for freedom of speech. Basic rights of franchise, which were denied to most of the Europeans, including Germans. And that's what he was arguing for. And he was kicked out of Germany for that. And he had to go exile himself in France. And this is what he was writing in 1844. Money, inasmuch as it possesses the property of being able to buy everything and appropriate all object, is the object most worth possessing. The universality of this property is the basis of money's omnipotence. Hence, it is regarded as an omnipotent being. Money is the pimp between need and object, between life and man's means of life. But that which mediates my life also mediates the existence of other men for me. It is for me the other person.